You turned it off? Turn it on for a second.
I can hear you.
Oh, yeah.
Turn your phone off. Yeah,
I said, no, we're taking it.
or at least down. Not just off, silent. Yeah. Kopi and I, we can take care of you. There's two of us. And I know where you live. Oh, dear. They're doing some work down there at Stearns Road? No, on Dunn Road.
Oh, well, they're getting rid of that T turn.
Uh-huh.
And it's, so now you're going to be able to just merge into Kirk from Dunham instead of having to make a radical 90-degree turn. Yeah, that's just that, I mean, that's years overdue, but it's good that that they're getting that done.
Anyway, I have an over address bill. Please have simple answers. I think you're enough for Mike.
What?
Every one of them has.
No, that was the handout at the county board.
Good morning. My name is Vern Tepe, and I call to order the Public Service Committee of Kane County for Thursday, July 22, 2021. May the clerk please call the roll.
Kopi?
Here.
Brown? Leonard?
Leonard here.
Lewis? Shepro?
Shepro here.
Sturgis?
Sturgis here.
Burag? And Tepe.
Tepe here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we start, I have some opening comments I'd like to make. It appears as though we have some interested parties here at our committee meeting. We welcome you. But some background and information as to our rules of order and the jurisdiction of this committee. As a committee, items that are acted on here are forwarded to other committees or the county board for their action and approval, and are not put into effect solely based upon what we do. Several offices that are included in our agenda are run by elected officials. So the county clerk, county recorder, and county treasurer are all elected officials. These individuals do not report to the county board. They report to and are responsible to the voters who elected them and gave them the responsibility to handle their office and the duties of that office. These offices submit their reports through our committee, and we work in concert with them to handle and forward on any issues that may require an action by the county board. If you have questions for elected officials, you should address those issues to their offices. If you are not satisfied with their response, there are other venues that you can pursue. I sincerely respect the right of voters to express their opinions and the agenda that they may want to pursue. This stands whether I personally agree with your issues or not. Accordingly, we welcome those of you who want to make public comments and have signed up to speak. Please note, however, this is not a venue for public question and answer session. If you have questions to pose to the committee members or any of the elected officials, please feel free to contact us by email or phone or schedule an appointment to meet with us. All of our email addresses and other contact information are readily available on the county website. If you have signed up to speak today, please note you will be limited by the rules of order to 5 minutes for matters appearing on the agenda and 3 minutes for items not appearing on the agenda. Total public time is limited to 30 minutes for matters appearing on the agenda. If you have any documents, please provide them to the chair, me. I will review them, and if I feel they are appropriate, I will include them with our next committee agenda. Please try to refrain from repeating any comments that were made by other speakers or at the county board meeting. We were all there. Also, decorum and order is very important. Please refrain from any disruptive or disorderly conduct. If there is any disruptive or disorderly conduct, I will suspend the meeting while offending individuals are escorted from the premises. Thank you. So first, may I have approval of the minutes of June 17, 2020? Yes, sir, Mr. Shepro.
I ask unanimous consent that the minutes be approved as submitted.
Objection? So noted. Okay, we have 3 individuals signed up for public comments. And I'm going to call on them on the order in which I got the names, not necessarily the order in which you were signed up. So first on the list is Howard Katz. Morning.
Good morning. I'm here today to let people know of a recount that happened a few months ago that I took part of. We were in a room which had the machines that counted the ballots. I know from experience that when the mail-in ballots came in, 3 judges sat there to review them, the signatures, that out of the 84,000 mail-in ballots that were received, 164 ballots were actually contested and were given a chance to be redressed. Now, there has been some discussion about whether or not the ballots were initial. I checked with 2 lawyers on, who are conversant with election law and 1 election official. There is no law in the state of Illinois that says ballots have to be initial, which is a tradition that some counties in the state of Illinois still do. The ballots came in, the sealed envelopes were verified, and then if the signatures matched, they were then allowed to be put in for count. The recount happened with, I think, 4 different elections being reviewed. The people who were there for both parties sat there, looked at the ballots as the election officials reviewed them, and then were passed on. None of the ballot challenges actually merited anything. They found that the count done by the clerk's office was accurate, that the ballots were in good form, and that the tallies stood. I want to say that having watched the election process here in Kane County for decades, I think that the system here is very fair. I think that the people involved do an extremely good job in making sure that everything is done properly and is done according to the law. To the people who say that they have found errors, grievous errors, that everything should be redone, I say to you that you dishonor our nation and our democracy with your call for false and improper elections. These elections were done fairly, they were counted properly, and they were in fact a tribute to what we call democracy here in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Stephanie Maresco.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Maresco, and my address is 39W612 Caribou Trail, Campton Hills, Illinois. Distinguished members of the board, I stand before you today to officially request an independent third-party forensic audit. What many of you may not be aware of is that myself, along with members of our election integrity team, met with Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Dugan, Mr. Pollock, and Mr. Escoval. After we left that meeting on June 28th, we were left with more questions than we had answers for. Thus, the reason for coming to you today. Before you I think most of you have. Before you is a 4-page packet of questions that have been given to us by citizens of Kane County. We are respectfully requesting that these questions be added to the record. As was previously stated, the last time we met, election integrity is an American issue, not a political issue. Thankfully, in this day and age, when there has been so much partisan bickering, election integrity is something that both sides can agree upon. In fact, in 2018, U.S. House Representative Adam Schiff from California stated this, and I quote, "I continue to think our voting machines are way too vulnerable." Furthermore, U.S. House Representative Ted Lieu, also from California and a Democrat, said this, and I quote, "These voting machines can be hacked quite easily." Quote, "Workers were able to easily hack into electronic voting machines, and it was even possible to switch votes." End quote. Based on the seriousness of these two gentlemen's statements, coupled with the questions and concerns from Kane County citizens, it is imperative that we work together to resolve and prevent these issues from ever happening again in Kane County. Ladies and gentlemen, look around the room today. Before you are moms and dads, retired workers, and business owners. You, as distinguished members of the board, serve our community so well, and you do it because you're passionate about what happens in Kane County. But so are we. We care. As citizens and residents of Kane County, we deserve answers. You, as our representatives, can help unravel the mystery of what really transpired during the 2020 general election cycle. In closing, we ask you, our distinguished members of the board, for your help. We ask that you uphold the standards that are expected from our public officials who take an oath and whom we have placed our trust in. Otherwise, how can we be confident that voter integrity has been restored as we move forward here in Kane County? God bless you, and God bless the United States. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I don't want to mispronounce your name too badly. Stephen Johannae.
From Kane.
Didn't butcher it bad, thank you.
Wait,
He's not from Kane.
he's not from Kane. This person doesn't.
Please
live
be
in-
quiet.
Chairman, please put the gentleman in order. Thank you.
Please be quiet. Thank you, sir. Please go ahead. Please state your name and address first.
My name is Stephen Johannae. I live in Kendall County. I'm the chairman of the Kendall County Party, an established party in Kendall County. I have no axe to grind with Republicans or Democrats. However, we all know that over the last number of decades, people have lost faith in our institutions, whether it's education, political, religious, you name it. But then along comes people who want to tug on the heartstrings of those that are angry and fearful of the future because they've lost faith in their institutions. And those people need to be ashamed of themselves. So I was at the last meeting and I saw Mr. Peyton spew out a bunch of numbers. I wanted to see if he was right. Well, he said there was a over 53,000 increase in registered voters in Kane County. So the numbers I'm going to explain to you, or the percentages, is real simple. You take the percentage of registered voters gained and the percentage of population gained. And here's what I found out. Kendall County had a net gain difference of 16.76%. In other words, let's say they had no population increase, but they had registered voter increase of 16.76%. McHenry County, amazingly, had an 18.62%. Now, using Mr. Peyton's numbers, Kane County was 16.67. How come he's not in McHenry County? How come he's not in Kendall County? If Jack Cunningham is a criminal, then why not go to the other counties?
Hold
Yeah.
on, sir. Would you please remove this gentleman from the, hold on a minute. Would you please leave? Please, this gentleman up front,
I will be checking out.
please remove him. Make sure he's escorted from the building. No, that gentleman.
Let me know when I may continue.
Hold on. Let's remove him from the building. I'm sorry that you were interrupted. Please continue.
So we had Kendall at a higher percentage, McHenry at a higher percentage. Now DeKalb and DuPage, they were actually at a lower percentage. DeKalb was at 14.84 and DuPage was at 14.12. But using Mr. Peyton's Kane County number, okay? Kane County was at 16.67, and the total of all 5 counties using his number would have been 15.48. Nothing unusual there. But here's what's right, or here's the facts. He miscounted Kane County. He came to this board and told you that more than 53,000 gain was in the gain of voters. He was wrong. Well, let's put it this way. He was inaccurate. It was actually 58,077 votes. Okay? If you come to a board, I don't care if it's a corporate board or a county board or any board in between, you spew out incorrect facts or inaccuracies, you're not let back in that room again. So if Mr. Peyton wants to walk his walk, he can contact me through Facebook Messenger, pick out a precinct, and we'll go door to door. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on with our meeting now. Finance Department.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of privilege on this.
Shepro?
For those that may not be familiar with the rules, public comment is not limited to residents of the particular jurisdiction. I believe that any citizen or even non-citizens would have, any person would have the right to avail themselves of the, I believe it's in the Constitution, it's called the right of the people to petition the government for redress of grievances. And therefore, I think we welcome anyone from any portion and any place that has comments to make. Thank you.
As usual, Mr. Shepro, you are correct. Okay, let's go on. Finance Department. Okay, their reports are on file. County Recorder. Okay, they came in this morning and they're just extremely busy. County Treasurer.
Good morning. My name is Gary Hopp. I'm the Customer Service Manager for the Kane County Treasurer's Office. Treasurer Kilborn is traveling this morning, so he's not going to be able to attend. He asked me to take his place. I believe you have our report in front of you. I'll take any questions you have. There's only a couple things I want to mention. The second installment due date is scheduled for September 1st. The tax sale has been scheduled for November 1st. That is on time. It will be a computerized sale again this year. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that at the end of last month, we still had 5,860 unpaid first installments. Because of that, we sent out reminder postcards to properties that hadn't paid their first installments. We've done this for the past couple of years and we've had great success with that. And we did again this year. As of this morning, our percentage for collected first installments is 98.4%, which is, it has never been that high.
Good.
That's all I have. If you have questions, I'll entertain them.
Any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Leonard.
Just have one question for you. First of all, I wanted to make a statement and thank Mr. Kilborn for giving me a demand and weighted average that I had requested at the last meeting. It was a little bit more specific than I wanted. In the past, over 12 years, they had given a weighted average investment fund for King County. I was wondering if he could just do that for us instead, because that would compare to all the other months for the past 12 years.
I believe that Carolyn Brady prepared that statement for you. I will bring that to her attention.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And thank Mr. Kilburn again for his quick response to our request.
Will do.
Yes, sir. Mr.
Sturgis.
Sturgis.
So just so I'm clear, while we sent out the reminders, we're still ahead of the game comparatively.
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
So we have some money.
I'm just making sure I didn't hear that backwards.
Supervisors assessments.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Armstrong, Kane County Supervisor of Assessments. My report begins on page 26 of your agenda packet. A couple of updates because, as usual, the report's a week old at this point. The St. Charles Township final equalization factor is 1.0190. The Geneva Township equalization factor, final one, is 1.0155. The Geneva Township assessments are going to be published in the Kane County Chronicle on July 29th. Final filing deadline will be August 30th. Do not have a final publication date set for the St. Charles Township assessments. The remaining townships are in, but are still being processed, those being Burlington, Elgin, Campton, and Aurora. By this meeting next month, I expect to have that information. We are operating on schedule, and we're currently on track to have next year's tax bills be on time as well. Be happy to answer any questions the committee has.
All right. Mr. Sturgis.
Just a comment for Mr. Armstrong. A very large taxpayer, commercial, industrial user contacted me on with some heavy lifting concerns, way over my head. Mark, once again, professional beyond belief, I believe was able to cut to the matter and the heart of it, assist Mr. Bielak with this particular client. And again, Mark, I'm just wickedly happy that you're on our team. So
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
wickedly happy because some of his stuff is hocus pocus that is so far over my head, and I appreciate him being there. So.
Okay, Regional Office of Education. There we go.
Morning, everybody. I'm Pat Del Santo. I'm the Regional Superintendent of Schools for Kane County. This is a really busy time for us, even busier than our normal summers. It's prime hiring season for the school districts and also renewal of teacher licenses. So far we have renewed over 2,400 teacher licenses this year. We fingerprinted over 4,000 people, and we have a constant stream of people coming in and out of our office right now, being fingerprinted and background checked. It's also training time for our school bus drivers. Every school bus driver in the county must go through a refresher course once a year. That's a 2-hour refresher course. We have a number of instructors that teach that class. They were updated in June. We updated our curriculum and got it to the instructors. And next week, we will be training most of the drivers in the county so that they'll be ready to go in a couple of weeks. August 11th is when some of our districts are actually starting. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Everybody going to be ready for the school year?
We will be ready.
Okay, thank you. Next up is County Clerk, Mr. Cunningham. Good morning.
The main attraction. Mr. Chairman, I'm here to submit what I'm supposed to, my monthly report, which will show, in spite of the pandemic, we've taken in $944,260 so far. My first took office, we were taking in $640,000. That's over 300. So I would suggest that we're going to get over $1 million this year. We generate enough money in our office to pay for vital document records and tax extension. The elections is what we take from their general fund. And we continue to try to be as self-sufficient as we can. And I thank you for this opportunity to present that. As far as the other issues.
Jen, a microphone.
Microphone?
For you. People usually tell me to shut up. No, basically, first of all, I don't take this personally. These people have a perfect right to question what we're doing in our office, and we welcome that because we're here to learn. Every election, we look at it, what do we do, what can we do better, and that's what we shall continue to do. Unfortunately, they didn't stick around long enough to hear the answers of what you're going to have to their particular questions, but I don't like.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, point of information. As to the comment just made by Mr. Clerk, I think that since the minutes don't reflect comings and goings from the people in the audience, I think it should be noted for the record that virtually everyone who appeared to have come with respect to the issue that Mr. Cunningham is going to and his staff are going to address seemingly were not interested to stay around to hear the answers to those questions, which I think is very unfortunate because I know how much work has gone into this. But I would ask the minutes reflect that there was a mass departure after the public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Shepro. I will note that this meeting is being recorded and it will be available online to anyone, and I would hope they would avail themselves of the opportunity to see the same kind of things that this committee is going to see in the next few minutes. So thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Cunningham.
Yeah. And as far as I'm concerned, the accusations, I don't mind being called names because I've been in politics now for a good many years, and when you call me a son of a bitch, I take it as a compliment. But what I don't like is just to be referred to my people who are heroes as far as I'm concerned, to run elections. Elections, as you're going to find out today, are extremely complicated. We have very little flexibility of what we do. And basically, these people should be commended on the election that we held in Kane County. Not only is it complex to run a general election, but with a pandemic involved, it was above the call of duty. Now, I've given them compliments. I'm not giving them raises, so I want the board to know that. But with that, I intend to explain to you Elections 101 today, and hopefully that'll answer your questions. Mr. Pollack will now take the, start presenting. Are you going to do it from there, or do you want to do it from here? Okay, this is, we spent, staff is, every question they gave us, we taken through legal, the state's attorney's office here, they viewed all this. Our office, the IT department has viewed it. So this is a result of probably 102 hours of work that we've prepared for these people to give them the answer that they're not interested in.
Good morning, everyone. You're going to regret that you wanted me to come on the camera. That's a different story.
That's her taking a day off.
Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you, Clerk Cunningham, for the opportunity to make the presentation today. There's a lot of information here. I'll try to talk slowly, but I know we all have other things to do today. So, the Kane County Clerk's Office continues to review its processes in all areas, including the administration of elections. After each election, Clerk Cunningham looks at all the available data concerning the previous election, including reviewing the call logs from our call center, which documents the questions, problems, issues from voters and election workers, examining the post-election surveys completed by election workers. We had hundreds of our election judges complete surveys to give us feedback after the election, and having discussions with staff and members of the public. We understand that voters have questions about elections, and we do our best to respond to those questions. At last week's county board meeting, during public comments, some questions were raised by the speakers. This presentation is intended to provide some additional information to the board and this committee and address some of the questions raised at that meeting. As the clerk indicated, elections are complicated and have many moving parts. Running an election is a complicated process, which was made more complicated due to the pandemic
and the statutory changes to the election code that were passed by the General Assembly specifically for the 2020 general election. As was indicated, the rules of running elections are dictated by the legislature. We're a creature of the legislature, and we have to follow those rules. Preparing for an election takes many months of work to prepare for election day. It's more than just pushing a button the day before the election. So here are just a few of the things that go into planning that begins months and months prior to an election. Recruiting and training approximately 1,500 election judges, testing and preparing voting equipment, finding the polling places, and things change, especially during a pandemic. Some places say we don't want to be a polling place anymore. Voter registration and voter education, opening dozens of early voting sites, accepting vote-by-mail applications, assembling, mailing, and processing those vote-by-mail ballots. For those of you that have come over to the office and seen the automated system, it's made a great deal of benefit for the system, but when you're processing all of those ballots, it takes time. Opening and running 25 to 30 early voting sites, opening and closing nearly 90 polling places on election day, collecting the equipment after the election, processing and tabulating the votes, discovery recounts, the post-election stuff. And then I know we've mentioned before that at times we're running 2 or 3 elections at a time. When you finish the general election, you've got the consolidated elections that follow. So I think when we were here in December or January, we were talking about dealing with 3 elections at the same time. As former president of the National Association of County Recorders and Clerks, Clerk Cunningham has worked with and built a network of election officials throughout the country. Working with other election officials has helped to learn about new equipment, develop new ideas, and discuss what works and doesn't work. Earlier this year, Clerk Cunningham reached out to the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, which is a part of the Federal Homeland Security Agency, and has requested a consultation to review security and control procedures for elections in Kane County, another set of eyes on the process to help us find out what's going well and what other things we can do to improve. Following this consultation with CISA, a presentation will be given to the Public Service Committee. And we'll go into addressing some of the issues that were raised at last week's board meeting. There were questions raised at last week's board meeting regarding 3 sets of, quote, differences that they found in certain vote reports on the county website. One such question was asked why the numbers in the cumulative report and the election data analysis report. Some of these things are in that 4-page report that they referred to earlier. So the cumulative report and the election data analysis report are 2 of our post-election reports that are on our website. And the issue was raised that the numbers didn't match. It was noted there's a 28 vote difference between the 2 reports. However, there actually is no difference. The reports don't compare the same thing. It's an apples to oranges comparison. The number cited in the election data analysis report counts the number of ballots cast, while the number cited in the cumulative report counts the number of voters. The number of voters doesn't necessarily equal the number of ballots cast. I'll give an explanation. So if you're a registered voter and you go through the process, you sign in, your signature matches and is verified by the election judges, you get your access code, you go to the e-slate, you go through, you pick all your candidates, but you leave before you see the flag waving. We always said, make sure you see the flag waving so you know your ballot's cast. Well, people leave before that's done and they don't hit that last cast ballot button, you actually haven't voted for the candidates because you didn't vote. State law prohibits an election judge from voting for a voter. So if that voter does not wait till the end, cast the ballot, and leaves before the ballot's cast, that's where the situation happens. So in that scenario, the voter would be counted in the total number of voters in one report, but not a ballot cast because the voter didn't actually cast the ballot. So lesson here, make sure you see the flag. And it's amazing that only 28 voters out of 200-some thousand did that. So another question about differences was the 1,302 vote, quote, difference between the number of votes received by all candidates in a specific race versus the number of vote by mail cast in that race. The reference was to the US Senate race because that had the highest number of votes cast. However, a voter can choose to vote for one candidate or none of the candidates. We call that an undervote. And so in this particular US Senate race, of the vote by mail ballots cast, 1,302 chose not to vote for any of the US Senate candidates. That's normal. Another question asked about numbers not matching involved the difference between the number of vote by mail ballot applications received by our office and the number of vote by mail ballots that were returned. 91,409 Kane County registered voters applied for a vote by mail ballot, and 85,034 returned a vote by mail ballot, leaving a quote difference of 6,375. This is not unusual. Vote by mail ballots have been the law in Illinois for decades, although the name was changed from absentee to vote by mail in the election code. The process has always been the same. The difference, this 6,375 difference, is consistent with prior elections when approximately 10% of voters who request a ballot don't return it. This is a chart from our website. It's a little big. I want you to see the historical, that we go back to 1968. I'll zoom in a second on the most recent elections, but we've had absentee or vote by mail voting. These numbers are collected back to 1968. Feel free to go to our website. If you go to the election results page, either on the right side or the bottom side, depending on how you're looking at it, you'll see all kinds of data. You can see data on early voting, vote by mail, total turnout. It's all transparent and it's all there for you to check out. So I'll zoom in here on the last 5 elections. You have the primaries on the left, the generals on the right, and you see the number of ballots that were applications that were made versus the number returned. You don't see any matching numbers because not everyone returns the ballot. They may have decided they wanted to vote by mail and then didn't vote, or for whatever reason. But those numbers historically don't match, and there's a reason for that because not everyone returns those ballots. But there's no great difference in this election versus any other election.
Brian, I have a question on this.
I'm sorry, if you can hold the questions till the end, or also if there are any questions that, want to be submitted later on, that would be fine too. Thanks.
Thank you. At last week's board meeting, an assertion was made that the election day vote total shown on the November 3rd, 2020 election tapes in the report from the polling place at New Covenant Baptist Church in St. Charles do not match the votes reported for those precincts on the canvas. They do. The tapes match exactly, and we'll go through and show that. There was a chart that was presented saying that the numbers didn't match, and we'll go through and show that. So at New Covenant Baptist Church, which was examined, there are 4 precincts that vote at that location: Campton Township 10, St. Charles Precincts 8, 12, and 26. St. Charles Precinct 18, the voting was actually conducted at the branch court, not New Covenant Baptist Church, which was why when the report was presented to you that there were 0 votes cast there, well, they don't vote there. So it would be expected that 0 votes would be cast there. And you can see, taken from our website, the listing of the polling places that Township 18, St. Charles 18 votes at the branch court, not at New Covenant Baptist Church. So the totals for each of the 4 precincts will be presented below. You'll see 4 totals for Campton 10, 2 from each tape, because Campton 10 has 2 different ballot styles. The other 3 precincts have 1 ballot style, so we'll see 2 sets of numbers. A copy of the voting tapes and the analysis and memo that generated this was presented or will be presented to the individual who asked the questions, so that that individual can see the data again and see where this came from. So in Campton 10, you have the 4 different numbers. Remember, we mentioned this precinct has 2 different ballot styles. So you have 4 sets of numbers instead of 2. Those numbers, 66, 16, 60, and 18, add up to 160, which is the number that's in the final canvas for votes on election day. St. Charles 8, numbers match up. St. Charles 12, the numbers match up. And same with St. Charles 26. So there is no discrepancy in those precincts, the 4 precincts that actually vote at New Covenant Baptist Church. A question was raised about procedural changes made on election day that differed from what was taught in training or was taught in the manual. No procedural changes were made on election day. As has been the case in prior years, election judges received training prior to working on election day, and the training is intended to provide judges with adequate information to handle any challenges they might encounter on election day. Certainly, things come up. you always learn something new on election day. That's why we do this. And we appreciate the things that come out of it so that we can improve for the next election. One such thing is the surveys. I briefly mentioned it before, but all of our election workers receive a survey after the election for them to share their feedback, concerns, criticism, problems, good things that happened, and suggestions from election day. Several hundred of the election judges completed the survey and provided us information to help our office learn about issues so that we can use that information to improve the experience for the voters and for our election workers. Election judges are also given the opportunity to document any issues in writing on election day. We also have our call center, which logs calls from the polling places on election day and help us track the problems that happen in the polling place to see how well they're being solved and how quickly they're being solved so we can be prepared for the next time. You know, if there are a lot of issues that happen from a certain area or generally, then that's something to prepare for the next election. A question was asked about the number of provisional ballots for the 2020 general election. So provisional ballots can be used when a voter presents in person to vote, whether on election day or also in early voting, but the voter's name or correct address doesn't appear in the voter registration database. State statute 10 ILCS 5/5-50 requires that election authorities in counties with a population over 500,000 establish grace period and same-day registration. So we call same day when you vote on election day, when you register and vote on election day, but it's all part of this grace period where after the close of traditional voter registration 30 days before the election, we're still required to have procedures for people to register and vote at the same time. So it's not just those that are registering, it's also for those who wish to change their name or address or have recently moved into the county. So I want to be clear that the same statutory requirements for voter registration, if you register a year before the election or during grace period registration are the same. You still have to have the 2 forms of ID, et cetera, all of those things. Nothing changes during that time. Because the Kane County Clerk's Office follows state statute and provides for same-day and grace registration, voters have the opportunity to register and vote through grace period registration, even on election day, as long as they're casting their ballot when they register to vote. And they've chosen to do this rather than casting a provisional ballot. Since same-day registration was instituted, Kane County voters have overwhelmingly chosen to provide the required 2 forms of ID at the polling place, register, vote, and cast a ballot through same-day registration, rather than the more time-consuming method of choosing to cast a provisional ballot, then come back to the clerk's office at a later date and bring those same 2 forms of ID that they probably had on them, and then authenticate the provisional ballot, and then have the vote count. Do it in 1 step rather than 2 steps, and that's what the voters have chosen. The process is more convenient for the voter, more efficient and cost-effective for the election authority and taxpayers. Because Kane County voters chose to cast an actual ballot through same-day registration on election day, Kane County voters did not cast any provisional ballots in November, and the Kane County Clerk's Office had no provisional ballots to count. A question was asked as to why there are hundreds of voters listed as being 121 years old who voted in the 2020 general election. Well, first, there are no Kane County registered voters who are 121 years old. Some days I feel like I am, but we don't have any. In the past, state law did not require a date of birth as part of the voter registration system. So when data comes from a legacy registration system or from third parties who registered voters but didn't input a date of birth, the default date of birth is January 1st, 1900. As it's currently 2021, that would indicate an age of 121 years. Currently, the clerk's office collects the date of birth from voters who register through our office. We recently ran an extract in the voter registration database and found approximately 200 registered voters who still have that default date of birth of January 1st, 1900. Previously, we had over 3,500 voters with that default date of birth. And after reaching out to the voters to update their date of birth in our database, we've narrowed that number to about 200. We regularly update the voter database by sending letters to voters when we find missing information, and we'll continue attempting to contact those remaining 200 voters to update the birth date information. An assertion at the meeting was made that people as young as 2 years old were registered to vote. We searched our voter registration base and found no records of any registered voter who's 2 years old. An assertion was made that multiple people who are dead or don't live in Kane County voted in the 2020 general election. little bit of background. So Kane County, like all other election authorities in Illinois, maintains its own voter registration database. The Kane County Clerk is also the Registrar of Vital Records. You see that in the reports, which includes death records. So anytime a Kane County registered voter passes away in Kane County, we're aware of it. We have the death record, and that voter is removed from the database. Kane County shares its database with the Illinois State Board of Elections, and Illinois is part of a nationwide network which participates in an electronic information exchange with other states. And we receive information from the State Board of Elections when voters from Illinois subsequently register to vote in different states. So then what? When we receive information about a former registered voter who might have moved to another state, we investigate which state has the most recent registration. As part of this process, we contact the voter by sending them a confirmation letter to notify them that they're an inactive voter once we have this information and ask whether in fact they moved to a different state. If they have moved out of Kane County, we'll cancel that registration. But if we find out they haven't moved, we can reactivate them to the active status. Additionally, regular purges of the Kane County voter registration system are performed in accordance with state and federal law. According to our records, we are unaware of any voters voting in Kane County in the 2020 general election who are deceased or who are registered voters in another jurisdiction. Voters who vote in an election sign an affidavit under penalty of perjury. And election fraud is a felony in Illinois, and we've seen has been prosecuted in the rare instances that it's happened. A reference was made at the meeting to a social media post in which an individual claimed to have moved out of state but still voted in a congressional race in Illinois. We found that voter was a registered voter in McHenry County, not Kane County, and did not vote in Kane County. Some questions were also raised about the number of individuals who were registered to vote during 2020, especially in the time of COVID. How could we have so many people registering to vote? And then there have been comparisons about from the last 10 years about the number of registered voters and then the increase in registered voters over the past decade. So Kane County receives, in addition to what we do in our office, we receive online registrations from the State Board of Elections and the Secretary of State's office daily during those periods. We process the registrations on the day we receive them. According to the State Board of Elections, which runs the statewide online registration portal, 24,375 voters in Kane County registered online through the state board's online registration portal in the year 2020. Of that number, over 20,000 registered online in the last few months of the year, from June to the end of the year. During last week's county board meeting, it was stated that 9,999 voters were registered less than 30 days before the election, and at least 3,000 registered voters on election day registered to vote and voted, which was, quote, a clear violation of the law. As I indicated earlier in the presentation, state law requires the clerk's office to establish grace period and same-day voter registration for voters, and those registrations that occurred during the last 30 days before the election, including election day, are in fact conducted pursuant to state law. During last week's meeting, it was stated that there were 196,000 new voters in Kane County since 2012, and that this is indicative of fraud or some kind of malfeasance. While there has been a significant increase in the number of voter registrations since 2012, much of this increase comes from the changes to the election code and factors that are outside of the control of the clerk's office. Statistics can be a very useful tool when they're viewed in the proper historical and statutory context. In 2012, after the election, Kane County had almost 210,000 registered voters. At the time of the general election last November, Kane County had approximately 318,000 registered voters. So what goes into those changes? So first, in 2018, the city of Aurora, the voters in the city voted to terminate the Aurora Election Commission. So more than 53,000 voters from the city of Aurora who were previously counted in the city of the election commission's voter rolls were transferred to Kane County's voter rolls after Kane County assumed the election administration for the Kane County portion of Aurora. These 53,000, quote, new voters to Kane County makes up a significant portion of the increase to the number of registered voters since 2012. Additionally, the General Assembly approved online voter registration through the State Board of Elections online portal in 2014. We discussed some of the numbers from 2020, but we'll go through the numbers for the last decade as well. In 2017, the legislature also approved automatic voter registration, or AVR, which registers voters automatically when they applied for a driver's license or changed their address, the Secretary of State's facility, or some other state agencies. These two legislative changes facilitated a major increase in voter registrations sent to the clerk's office. According to the State Board of Elections, since 2012, 153,636 Kane County voters registered or changed their address through the online voter registration portal. Again, these registrations are done by the State Board of Elections. Voters go online, verify all their information to the State Board, and then the State Board of Elections sends that data to the clerk's office. In addition, 170,804 voters in Kane County registered or changed their addresses through the Secretary of State's office, and those registrations were sent electronically to the county clerk's office. This represents nearly 325,000 voter registrations, again, which can be new voter registrations, but can also be the updating of information. So if you move, you get married, you divorced, you change your name, you change your address, those things are also included in these numbers. So approximately 325,000 voter registrations just came from the online portal through the State Board of Elections and the Secretary of State's office since 2012. Locally, the Kane County Clerk's Office provides voter registration services in the office for residents who wish to register or update their information. Our office also trains deputy registrars, including partisan precinct committee persons and nonpartisan individuals from community organizations. The clerk's office also engages the public through our voter outreach program. Those of you that come up Randall Road may see the big Moose Heart sign. That's one of our partners in the voter outreach program. We have local businesses, organizations, governments with electronic signs who post messages like register to vote or election day is coming up. We engage the public that way, and we thank our partners in this process, and that's also helped to raise voter registration data as well, numbers as well. We heard some questions about the placing of initials on vote by mail ballots at the meeting. Those seem to parallel the assertions made by one of the campaigns back in November that certain mail-in ballots were invalid because they did not have initials by election judges. The Illinois Election Code does not require that judges initial vote by mail ballots. The candidate referred to a statutory section that addresses electronic voting systems that use ballot cards and ballot card envelopes that are deposited. And basically, they cited the wrong section. It doesn't apply to Kane County's voting machines, and it doesn't apply to vote by mail ballots at all. Vote by mail ballots are actually addressed in a separate section of the election code, and there was a supplement in the 2020 statute. We addressed this committee and the board previously that the General Assembly passed a law last year that applied only to the 2020 general election, and it had specific requirements about vote by mail as well. But at no point in that legislation was there any requirement that judges initial the vote by mail ballots themselves. The clerk's office made a presentation to the Public Service Committee on October 22nd of last year. Some of you were members of the committee or reviewed it. There are new members here, so we've already been going for a long time, so rather than going through the presentation again, I encourage you to go to the YouTube channel, and if you haven't seen it, I think it was a 10 or 12-step process, not 12 steps, 10-step process that went through every stage of the vote by mail process from the application to tabulation. We had some video demonstrations of our, at that time, newly acquired automation equipment, and if you haven't seen it, please come over and see it. And we had some newspaper and TV media reports about how well prepared we were and how we were ready to handle the increase in vote by mail ballots. So I've got links here for the link to the video for the meeting on October 22nd, as well as when NBC 5 and CBS 2 came out to see our equipment and did a presentation on it on the news. So just briefly, these are complex issues, and this is just a small portion. You know, as the clerk said, you know, this is Elections 101. This is a small portion of Elections 101, and we're doing this every month, but no one wants to hear that. So we have complex issues, and these questions require complex answers. The clerk's office will continue to strive to be the most transparent election authority in Illinois and throughout the country. The best way to address complex questions such as these is to reach out directly to the clerk's office, make an appointment, and come into the office. Clerk Cunningham and his staff will be happy to work with you to answer questions and address your concerns. Very often, many of these questions could be answered in a much easier and more direct method by coming over, accessing the information, like the poll tapes, and having that conversation rather than going through other means. So if you have questions, please direct them to the clerk's office, to Jack directly. Phone number and email are up on the website, or up on this video here. So hope we answered and addressed some of those issues. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Surgis.
Thank you, Mr. Tepe. Just a quick statement that
Microphone, yeah.
Is this on? There we go. Just a quick statement that while sitting in this chair, it's so important that we listen to both our constituents, but also that we maintain a professional relationship with our counterparts here at the board. When this group reached out to me, I was very simple in asking them to place their questions, make their comments a question, and place them in writing that could be answered. I have always found Jack friendly, and he has always taken my call. He's never left me dangling. I've met with him previously when the spouse of a deceased constituent called. Jack graciously brought me into his office, and we worked together to try and find out what was happening there. I voiced my concerns about the mail-in ballots and will continue to do so. And when I emailed Jack this week suggesting that he be at this meeting, Jack is at this meeting. So I just want to be as fair as I can to both sides. And Brian, if I can, my question remains on the mail-in votings. And I want to make sure that I understand this so I can explain it. It seems that several groups are doing mail-in votes. Let me rephrase that. Are sending out mail-in applications, not just the clerk's office. And some of those are legit clerk office ones. Some of them aren't.
Look how old Jax looks.
But I'm not sure that matters. I think once you get a mail-in ballot, regardless of where it comes, that could be sent in. And I'm not sure that everybody understands that, but that's the way it was explained to me, whether I like it or not. The other question that I have on that, or the other problem I have on it, is a deadline's a deadline. And I understand that the mail-in ballots have 14 days to come in after the election. However, there's no postmark on them. So it doesn't seem to matter whether it was postmarked, if the election was on a Tuesday, those can be sent in as late as, Saturday to get mailed in. And I know that everybody looks at this stuff and says, well, golly, there's got to be a better way to do that to make sure that those ballots are sent or postmarked by a deadline. And I don't have an answer to that, and I don't have a solution for it, but I do want to be specific as I can about the problem. And to everybody listening, this is what I was told. This is the response I received. And to be as fair as I can, Jack has always been responsive to me and was asked to come. And I appreciate you putting this, listening, hearing, seeing this in writing, giving a response in writing means a great deal. And I'm sure there will be more questions. And I appreciate your willingness to work on these and try and be transparent on it.
Thank you. Actually, basically, I have to repeat because
Microphone. Jack.
basically I have to repeat because some people left. But as I said before, I don't take this personally. I personally like questions because it can bring up things I don't think of. When that happens, I thoroughly investigate them and come up with a proper answer, or if necessary, make a proper arrangements to make sure we don't do something that isn't positive for the elections. I take my job very seriously, and I take these questions very seriously. And basically, I was a little disappointed when these people walked out because I spent over 102 hours getting their answers to their questions. And I basically am glad they came back to hear it, but they did miss the first part of the presentation, which did answer some of their questions. Now, as at the end of the meeting, at the end of the presentation, it says, we're welcome. We want you to send emails, continue giving us questions. We've given you some other areas of references. We would like you to do that. I still will be responsible to these people to answer their questions, even though I think they walked out quite rudely. without giving a chance to answer the questions. But that's not the issue here. The issue here is I'm explaining to you what we do in elections, and I've met with the state's attorney's office. Our office has followed every blueprint that we're allowed by statute. We can only do what we're told we can do by the government. I can't throw out ballots of people who I don't like to vote for me or something like that. So I don't have much discretion at it. They're asking me to do authority to do things that I do not have the authority to do. I will do everything within my authority. The only thing I can say that I stand by the results of the election after looking what the questions that they had. We've gone through 3 recounts of the election. At the end of every election, the state of Illinois picks out randomly 5% of the precincts that basically we have to rerun the results to make sure they jive with the results that we have on election day. Our office did 25%. Candidates also came in with their exploratory recount when they were a certain percentage. They were percentage close to the other candidate. They had a right to come in. That happened with 4 candidates, so they all had 5%. So you can see, recounting the ballots, almost all of our ballots have already been counted. It'd be a waste of my time and we follow the law. Some of the questions you're asking have to refer to the state's attorney because I'm not your state's attorney. I lost that race by 1,200 votes. And it was one of the smartest things the county voters did at that time. So see, in this business, you got to understand there's only, there are no ties. You're going to win, you're going to lose. So basically, you better be able to take both of them. I've won and I've lost, and I'd like to lose graciously. I respect the system, and I stand up for the system. There's nothing that's been criminally wrong in this election in Kane County. I'm not going to defend what happened in Georgia or Timbuktu or other areas because I don't have any personal knowledge of that. The only thing I can tell you is what happened to Kane County. I can understand people not understand the election process because as we've gone through this, I think one of the lessons here is extremely complex. There are many moving parts and you have to work to keep them together. And as I said before, instead of, my office, my staff should be praised for the job they did. Elections are complex, as I said earlier, and this election was extremely more complex because of the pandemic. So I stand by our results. I'm sorry if you don't agree with them, but the votes have been cast and the will of the people of Kane County are accurately communicated to you by the results of that vote.
Chairman Tepe, can I just finish one final comment?
Go ahead.
On Friday evening, one of the speakers, there were 3 people that spoke. One of the speakers called me Friday evening. We spoke for about an hour. She is still in the room and did not leave. She was not rude. She was very precise. Her questions were in writing, and she's still here listening. And I just wanted to thank you for sticking around.
And she can come back to my office with me after this meeting. We'll be glad to give her more time. And I'm sorry of our first meeting, I didn't explain things properly. I apologize for that. There was obviously some misconceptions. We tried to give them the documentation, but the documentation is not easy to read. I mean, to follow. So we're doing the best. We're doing the best we can, folks. And God bless you.
Mr. Copey.
I think Ms. Monique had her hand up first.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I saw you.
Thank you. Mr. Tepe, I wrote a brief synopsis of what my opinion is in regards to.
Mr. Chairman, I did put my hearing aid in, but I'm still having difficulty hearing Mr. Copey.
Sorry, I always get that complaint. Okay, I'll try. I wrote a brief notation to myself. Essentially, it's theoretical in nature, and that it's somewhat contrary to your opening statement. And it is of no offense, I hope. It's not meant to be. We sit here as a legally identified and democratically appointed extension of the people. We represent the people's sovereignty. The Public Service Committee, other than the judiciary branch of the government, is the only bastion that separates the people's redresses and grievance to the larger government on the issue of alleged election conduct.
Mr. Copey, can you get closer to the mic?
I'm sorry. I understand. the Public Service Committee, other than the judiciary branches of the government, is the only bastion that separates the people's redresses and grievances to the larger government on the issue of election conduct and process. The Public Service Committee function is synonymous in large part with all public service committees throughout the entire United States and America. Election integrity and transparency is possibly the highest priority and action of this committee. And election oversight, and as I say, these are notes, so I may get a little mixed up here. It can be argued that this purview is mandated by the state and federal law. The Kane County Clerk has expressed to me and to others that they have conducted elections according to the law. But be that as it may, but it does not provide reasonable access to the clerk's office, in my opinion, for the purpose of examination. Due to the fact that the clerk is elected, there exists a vast perception that the law itself offers a high degree of autonomy to his office. Notes, records, videos, surveillance, timestamps, envelope stuffing, mail acceptance, voter purge, out-of-district mail ballots, third-party handling, election equipment, calibration, the election judge's logs, even the chain of custody is assumed to be a partisan function is secured within the clerk's autonomy. Furthermore, other than the county clerks across the United States, when they certify an election, those results are considered inculpable and are protected and bound by law. Therein lies the dilemma. The clerk is not going to open himself or his staff or offer himself to substantial or insubstantial critique or even other perceptions of the same. And for the most part, the county board must serve a benevolent function to the county's employees and are forced to respect the autonomy of the clerk's office. Now, which brings us full circle to this moment. We can't, the claims incite a certain illegitimacy. And if that's the case, and there's a systemic problem within the system, then my own election is in question, or at least a portion of the votes are in question. So we can't blame a candidate if they are elected under the system. We cannot blame the clerk for certifying the votes according to the law. I'd like to finish this. I'll try to round it up. But essentially, Mr. Chairman, my view of what is our democratic expectation and our democratic purview about the law, it's not unreasonable to ask that we use this committee for this purpose. Now, the votes that are in complaint are systemically argued that they are post-tally problems. And I don't know how it works explicitly. And there are very few people that do. We have to depend on the clerk. We have to depend on the staff. But if the people come with their redress and their grievance it is absolutely critical that we listen to them and answer those questions specifically, because without the perception that our election, our democracy is in order and secure and legitimate and viable. And even if it is, and there is that perception that it isn't, that is a very big problem, and we need to hear it, every word. Thank you. And I do have a couple comments on some comments.
Thank you.
Louis needs to
Yes.
speak. We have
I'm sorry, Ms. Wodnicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With very much respect for you, I think removing one of the speakers has kind of stunned the other speakers that were here to voice their opinions or to support some of the speakers that were here. I think many of them are new to the county process and they're just trying to be heard. You know, I do have very much respect for you and of course respect for the residents of our county. There is one more speaker that would like to speak. I don't know if you would open that up. It's up to you. It's your decision, your meeting. And Brian, I would like a copy, either hard copy or email of your presentation, please.
We'll make anything available you want.
Okay,
And
yeah.
actually, the board has authority to go to the state's, the board has the authority to go to the state's attorney's office for any legal questions you have. These people do not. So basically, they are here. They cannot answer every citizen's request to be involved in divorces and everything else. So they are the attorney for the board. So you have a right for an opinion. These people will not have that right. They will come to me and then I will ask for an opinion from the state's attorney's office, who is here representing at this point.
Okay, this is their government, not our government. And
Okay,
I understand what you're saying, Jack. And,
But actually,
uh-huh.
you know, I'm running the election based on my background, which is I can't give you a legal opinion, even though I have 2 doctorate of jurisprudence. I don't get involved in you, even though I taught state and local government at a university. But if some of these people, I would have given a free pass to attend the class if they would like to do so, if I were still teaching. But at this time, you know, I can't, that's not my job. It's my job to perform the functions that the statutes of the state of Illinois require me to do, and we do that.
Okay, thank you, Jack. And thank you, Mr.
Thank you for your
Chairman.
comments. I'm sorry, but I do not feel it's appropriate to open it up for comments from the audience. They can come to our next meeting or they can come to the board meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Frost.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not on the committee, so I do want to speak, but I think Ms. Lewis indicated she had a question. She is on the committee, so I'll yield to her first.
My apologies. Too much going on. Ms.
no
Lewis?
problem. It's hard when you're the person that videos in to get recognized, but I wanted to, and I'll try to keep it real brief. So back in 2018 in the primary, I won my primary by 3 votes. And that's a really, really low margin. And so there was a recount. And, you know, many lawyers were there and lots of officials and things. And we went through every possible scenario, and I still won by 3 votes. But that made me realize how important this process is and the integrity of the process is. And so when this discussion first came up several months ago, I was very interested in it. And Mr. Copey and myself and Ralph Padron, who had been FOIAing a lot of information, made an appointment with Mr. Cunningham's office and Brian. And we went over and they literally spent over 2 hours going through every scenario that we had, every question that we had, every irregularity that Mr. Padron thought he found. And at that time, Mr. Copey, myself, and Mr. Padron all left there feeling satisfied with the answers and feeling like Mr. Cunningham's office was being run very well. So I just want to go on record as saying that I fully support the election process in our county and the amazing job that these people are doing. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Cunningham and Mr. Pollack for some clear and concise answers to the questions that were brought up at the county board meeting. I love concise questions and concise answers. That said, the speakers have provided a lengthier list of questions. At today's meeting, I gave my copy to Mr. Cunningham, and all I would ask of them is to do the same thing with this list. If you wouldn't mind going through it, take some time to research it and come up with the answers. And I'm not even really asking you to come back to this committee so much as I would ask you formally to meet with Ms. Maresco and 1 to 2 people of her choice when you're ready and go through those questions. I think the best way for the board to put this issue to bed is to make sure that every one of these questions is asked and answered. That's simple as that.
No argument from the chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Cunningham? Okay.
am I free? Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Shepro?
I just have a couple of comments. First, I, for one, would have no objection to hear from a speaker who somehow felt that they weren't given an opportunity. I think we could do that, but we could come back to that. I too want to thank Mr. Cunningham and his staff for the work that they did on all this. And I also want to note that there were other people who were here at the beginning who stepped out and then have returned to hear the presentation. So I think that it's true that not everybody left the room. I did want to just focus in on one point. The individual who was asked to leave has been at many meetings like this, and this is not the first time he has disrupted that meeting. At the very first meeting that he came to that I was involved in, he decided that he was entitled to sit among the members of the executive committee and participate in the meeting as if he were a member of that committee, which he was not. I later found out that although I actually let him talk for about 20 minutes, he later was resentful that I had asked him to cease and desist. I just want to focus in on one item because he made a presentation to the county board, and the whole premise of his discussion was his discovery that there were, as he said, over 100,000 vote increase from the 2010 election to the 2020 election. And he cited the number. And the number that he cited for 2010 was 129,000 voter turnout in Kane County. That number is actually correct on one level. However, and I will certainly be willing to be corrected by Mr. Cunningham and his staff, my understanding is that number in 2010 did not include any votes from the city of Aurora. It was a report only on the non-Aurora portion of Kane County. And essentially, all of his analysis was predicated on this startling discovery of these 100,000 additional votes. And so while I agree that all questions should be answered, I think that the clerk's office should not be burdened with having to respond to questions that are based on really just careless. It's not hard to determine where those votes were. Over the years as an election junkie, I have found the county clerk's website to be a particularly useful, detailed, and accurate source of information. And if you're not sure about that, I would suggest you try finding on other counties' websites any comparable election information, and it will be hard to find. But again, questions are legitimate to be answered, but there is a process. And it's a process that I think accommodates the rights of people to question the returns. But but I remember the 2000 election when the others were seeking to keep going. And, you know, one of the slogans was, well, you have to stop counting at some point. There has to be some finality. Much of the information that was submitted was information that was developed, as I understand it, during the discovery process involving a very close congressional race. The candidate in that instance elected not to seek a court case to air his concerns, but instead chose to go to the United States House of Representatives, which also has a process for reviewing the election. So again, I think it's appropriate to ask questions. And actually, I think I would note, I'm not sure if Mr. Surgis got his question answered about the one issue that was raised with respect to the postmarks. But again, I think there has to be an end to it. And I think you have to consider also whether some of these questions, and again, I refer to Mr. Payton, were submitted with any sense of accuracy or integrity before we ask our staff to put in additional time on that. And I thank you for indulging me. But I would ask if the one speaker who felt that they weren't given an opportunity, I think we could probably devote 5 additional minutes. I would agree with the chairman that we're not going to reopen it, but perhaps that one person could be accommodated. Thank you.
Internal control gives me authority over my office, and any question, I don't care who thinks it's frivolous, any question comes in from a constituent has the same priority in my office. They would be treated seriously. We'll try to get to the bottom and give them the answer. So frivolous questions are one that gives a person the ability to adjust to say that's frivolous. Well, that's not out. Any question is valid that a person has regarding voting while I have watch over the votes of Kane County.
Mr. Surgis?
Chairman Tepe, just to answer Mr. Shepro, Brian did give me an answer last year. I just don't like the answer.
Okay.
So I'm just being honest. I mean,
Today, and I didn't hear.
He answered the question last year. I just don't believe that the process is appropriate.
Okay.
So.
Ms. Bates?
I have 3 questions that I think are simple. Brian, Mr. Pollack, or Mr. Cunningham, how do you know if a machine isn't working properly on the day of the election? I was a poll watcher one time and I had to dash over to the election to get somebody to come and fix it.
Well, we have our election staff. We have IT, which assists us. We have there's different levels. So you've got, if something happens, the tech judge will call in to one of the different levels. So we have zone managers that are rotating around. If they can't fix it, you have the IT that'll come out. So they're reporting it. They're calling to the call center. I remember we log all of those calls. So when something happens, we're made aware of it, and whoever's closest at that point will.
So they run out and fix it. Okay. Could the judges ask, did you see the flag when they cast their ballot as you're walking? I mean, 28 of 100,000 is not very many, but.
I mean, I guess, do you really want?
Hope that wasn't me.
Do you want people, I mean, we do have a secret ballot in this country, and I mean, do you want people looking over your shoulder, seeing?
As you're walking out the door. Okay. Would you explain one more time ballot style in case people don't understand ballot style?
So with the way that lines are cut for in a particular precinct, you may, I don't know if it happens in your precinct, but you may have where a state rep district line or a state senate district or a county board district or a school board district is cut in the middle of a precinct. So for example, if your precinct has 2 different state representatives, one part of the precinct would have one ballot style that would have state rep candidate, state rep A or district A, and another one have district B. And it's not that in some cases, we have many ballot styles because there are different lines that are cut. So you can have a split of all those different things in a precinct. So if you have a different state, multiple state reps and county board candidates and whatever in that time, you could have, in this case, what we presented the Campton issue, there were 2 ballot styles. Some precincts have many more, which will be an important thing for the board to look at.
That's why it's important this remapping goes well, because in some of our precincts, we have over 22 ballot styles.
Oh my gosh.
When you walk in, can you imagine paper-wise going through and getting you the right ballot? With our system, we come in, we identify it, go to our database and pull in your ballot style automatically. There are ballot style errors made in one election that we had regarding Batavia and St. Charles and Geneva. They were trying to get something for the city. The problem is some of the precincts were outside the city. So when you came in there, and that was challenged on the basis that some people that they were getting the wrong ballot style. Now, at that point in time, what was happening, the judges had to look it up and hand enter your ballot style. Now, when you go in to vote, they have where you sign the signature. I have since put up your ballot style on a barcode to do away with human error. So when you come in, they scan that, goes right to your ballot style. There's no chance of that human error. Now, the equipment we have, when we investigated, we went through every other piece of equipment, and we found in our equipment there was only about 8 things that go wrong, whereas with a paper ballot are about 40, not marking it right or wrong. And basically in our research, we found out those 8 problems were judge human error. And so we try to make sure that our election does not have human error. Now, you have human beings involved, so I can't say there have not been errors done. There's instances, and when people come in to vote and they walk out without pressing the voting button, and consequently, that's human error. So you can have human error from the voter to the judges. Every element of this could have human error in it. And we try to minimize that as much as we can. And I welcome anybody to come over. Some of the questions you ask are better answered. I know you've come into the office and looked through the system. Also, some of these questions can be better asked because we have one of the best databases in the country, DFM. And so when you come in, these questions, I can't remember how many votes. There's just too much to remember here. And as I jokingly tell people, when I was younger, I thought I had a photographic memory, but as I get older, I think I'm running out of film. But so I can't remember everything.
Nobody uses film anymore.
That's why I'm going to shut up now. I hope we've answered your questions. And
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Okay, I'd like to close. Mr. Copey.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I believe I made a mistake in my dialogue. I mentioned that it sounds like the grievances come from post-tally systemic problems, in their opinion, but I meant to say pre-tally systemic issues. So I just wanted to make that correction. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Shepard.
Just very brief comment. The comment about the ballot styles. If you remember back to when we used the punch cards and you had to do the punch card and you had the little book, the same thing they had down in Palm Beach, where you had to flip the pages and stick it in. Every ballot style had to have its own little independent booklet. And I know, I don't remember how many my precinct used to have, but it was many. I don't think it was 22, but every one of those had to be a separate standalone unit. And so, lines and confusion were often substantial. And now with the machines that Mr. Cunningham oversaw are getting, you can now load all of those ballot styles into the same machine, which is why when you go in to vote, they find out where you are and you get issued something. And you don't have to have 15 or 20 different stands and hope that somebody doesn't go to the wrong one by mistake.
Okay. I'd like to conclude this aspect of the meeting by saying I personally spent a decent amount of time with the state's attorney and with Clerk Cunningham's staff and office because I believe all of these questions need to be answered appropriately. I also believe in decorum and process. This committee is not the place to put someone who has been elected independently under scrutiny. There are other venues to do that, and this is not the right venue for that. It's our process to work with them in concert, not to try to tell them what to do. There are, again, other ways that it can be done, and Mr. Cunningham's office is completely open to this. And I really want to thank Mr. Cunningham, his staff, and the state's attorney, and Ms. Moser's staff for really making all of this very professional and well done. So please, let's go on now. Other business? We have no need for,
Chairman?
yes,
I would ask unanimous consent to place all reports on file.
that'll come, that's coming in the agenda, so you want to be ahead of the time?
Well, I didn't think we were having an executive session.
Okay, unanimous consent, any questions? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Shepro.
All in favor?
Need a second.
Thank you.